to pass it over now to Janet and Dominic and Kanchan to take us through the presentation. And thank you once again for joining us. And please put any questions that you have in the chat box, and we will definitely get to those at the Q&A break. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Alicia for that introduction, and I'm just going to look to my colleagues, make sure you guys are hearing me okay. We're good. Dominic, give me a thumbs up. I'm good. Okay, so I'm just going to move to sharing my screen with you, some slides. We're going to, you're going to find us moving back and forth between the slides. It's great to see so many familiar faces. A lot of you are our colleagues, and I'm also noticing that a lot of you are new, saying you're new to coaching. And we're just thrilled to be here and to share with you just, you know, our perspectives on what we've learned, and a little bit more around how we've set up engagements for some of our clients. So just give me one sec here. We've talked about what we're going to learn. So I'm going to share with you a model, and Alicia's referred to this. You are going to receive, if you stay on this webinar, this is an incentive for you to stay on this webinar and not hang up. Hopefully we'll engage you enough to stay on it. You'll get a handout, which we're going to post in the chat, but you'll also get it, coaches, you'll get it when you complete the webinar for your CCEUs from Kim. So it'll come to you in your in-basket directly through your email. So I want to start with talking specifically about at Essential Impact how we approached MLSE. So Dominic and I are associate coaches with Essential Impact. And this is a bit of, I'm going to share with you a model that we use for coaching engagements. We're also going to share with you that there are other ways, you know, to create coaching engagements. But this is, I think, you know, sort of the a way of approaching creating a coaching engagement that's going to generate results. So the first step to it is really starting to understand your client. And so I'll speak to MLSE specifically on behalf of Dominic. We, in creating this engagement, part of the goal here was to truly align to the organization's mission, their vision, and their business strategy. And whatever you do, whether you're a life coach and you're coaching one-on-one, you're going to want to align to that person's purpose and mission and vision for themselves, or for the purpose, mission, and vision of an organization. So that's how you're first going to create a winning engagement. So in the case of MLSE, we wanted to make sure we were very clear on aligning to their purpose. Now they have a wonderful purpose, which is to unite and empower their employees to create extraordinary moments for fans. So in all of our coaching engagements, the relationship back to fan satisfaction was very important here in order to create that alignment between learning about coaching, practicing coaching skills amongst leaders within the organizations, with the ultimate outcome of creating greater fan satisfaction. So in this engagement, the goal was to train senior leaders in coaching skills and to bring a coach approach to the culture. So to bring within the organizational culture a coach approach to leadership. So that's why aligning to mission, vision, and business strategy was so important. And knowing what those business results were important. And a big piece of this was increased leadership development. MLSE has a very young staff, millennials, 851 full-time, but over 3,800 part-time staff. Much of them, you know, very young, and for many, their first job. So part of this is to create, in the strategy of creating a coach approach culture, is to create more leaders within the organization and to create that pipeline for leadership going forward. Another piece of the pie here is executive sponsorship. So in a winning coach engagement, really important to set and be clear on who is the executive sponsor. The coach, myself and Dominic, need to have a very clear communication link with an executive sponsor. In the case of MLSE, it was the senior VP of HR, and for such a big company, it's actually interesting. They have a very small HR department, given the number of employees, but also given the number of people they serve. So our senior VP of HR was the sponsor, but in fact, we worked one level below that with the Vice President of Training and Development. And that person subsequently retired from the company, and we even worked a level below that to the training manager, who is Jennifer Horn, who's up at her cottage having a nice break. So she's going to try to sign on if her internet connections are working okay, and she'll be listening in. So we know that having that really direct link to executive sponsorship is important. It's also great, often your executive sponsors in HR or training and development, so it's also great to have an operational leader support as well. And in this case, early on, the vice president of operations got involved with the initial part of the initiative and was a spokesperson for why taking a coach approach within the culture was important. And then the other big piece in executive sponsorship is having the budgeted dollars in the budget. And that's not up to us as the external coach. That's really up to, hopefully you're working with a client who recognizes how important that is. And remarkably, at MLSE, 70% of the training budget was dedicated to coaching training. So that is actually quite a phenomenal percentage. The next piece in our model for winning coach engagement is where we go in and teach a coaching skills course, which is an ICF accredited coaching course. It is in the ACTS SH pathway. We teach 16 hours followed by an additional 8 hours so that the leader actually has 24 accredited ICF hours of coaching that they can then continue on the pathway to getting their certification. And the goal is always to build that internal coach capacity, hopefully ICF accredited, so that the external coaches will eventually disappear. The goal is for us to get out of that job and for them to be able to carry on and sustain the coaching. So in this case, what was built into coach skills training was a 16-hour course, so a 2-day course, followed by a year later an 8-hour course. But not just the courses, it was also about sustainment sessions. So every business quarter, Dominic and I came in and did a 2-hour sustainment session where we would do coaching demos. We would invite alumni from the program to come back in and teach and share with us what they were struggling with, and we would support them with that. We also did some mentor coaching with specific sales teams to help mentor them to build their skills in sales as well. So a number of different things related to supporting getting the coaching training. The embedded external coach on this far right that I've brought up was myself and Dominic, and just having that connection to the sponsor. We also had a common coaching definition, and at MLSE, here's their definition of coaching. We didn't create this. I mean, they created this. They're the ones that, the reason why this is such a successful design is because of what they did. Their definition is a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires our employees to reach their peak potential. Beautiful. So we would have this common coaching definition as well as a framework for coaching so that everybody was talking a common language. And then, as I mentioned, developing those ICF accredited coaches internally. Eventually, we're going to get there. We're still working on that. And the sustainment activities. The last piece of the model relates to identifying key performance indicators. And I noticed in the chat, a lot of you said, looking forward to hearing about indicators. And part of this is, I think for us as coaches, is to think about before we get into a coaching engagement and after, what are some things we can measure to prove, evidence-based, that coaching is making a difference on business results? Because ultimately, we're coaching executives to help them get their results. So we, as the sort of external coaches, coaching our executive sponsors to think about what might be some key performance indicators that we can look at before and after to measure results. And then also embed that into one-on-one coaching that is happening within the organization. So one of the biggest ways we embedded that across the organization with 4,500 staff was coaching huddles before every shift, before every event at MLSC. Staff teams were pulled together and they were always asked 3 questions. And one of the main questions they were asked is, what are you going to do this evening or today to create an extraordinary fan experience? And then there is this whole piece around marketing. So, you know, if you think about all of these factors, there's still a lot of communication and marketing that needs to go into making this come alive. And MLSE did a superb job at this. They really embraced social media. They used a free platform out of Facebook called Workspace to post testimonials. They invited their leaders to create videos and video testimonials around what they are experiencing through coaching. They started a hashtag coaching huddle campaign. They're really focused because, you know, when you've got 22,000 people coming into your venue every night, if you think about Scotiabank Arena, you know, I just realized if some of you don't know what MLSE is, maybe I should say it's Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. So they own 4 major sports teams as well as providing concerts and arts and speaking events here in Toronto. So the marketing side of things, you know, testimonials and also a hashtag campaign around coaching moments, and then some really great initiatives that they did around sending out little mini videos, one of which I'm going to show you as part of this presentation. So in a nutshell, that was the framework, and you're going to get a handout which will show, you know, 10 success steps and how to create some of these measurable outcomes. So what we found in our results over 3 years, now keep in mind this has been a 3-year engagement and will continue. We're on a little COVID pause at the moment, but some of the things we measured in particular was keeping track of the annual budget score. We looked at over 3 years, every single alumni who had taken the program, what had happened to them in their leadership journey, because one of the main results that MLSE wanted to achieve was faster leadership development. And remarkably, 37% of the alumni have been promoted in less than 3 years. Engagement scores are usually well embedded into organizations these days, so a great opportunity for you as a coach to find out what's the engagement score before my coaching engagement contract and what is it afterwards, even modifying the engagement survey to have specific questions on coaching if they're not there. MLSE went from a 72% engagement score to 80. And then a 50% increase in employee recognition because they really did a social media campaign on employee recognition through coaching. Of course, many organizations want to decrease their turnover, and you can imagine at MLSE with so many part-time staff, that's critical. So there was a 6% decrease in employee turnover. And then here's our big result, was a 10% increase in fan satisfaction scores. Very important for a company like MLSE, where ticket prices are not exactly on the low ball, and where, you know, to buy a corporate box is you know, it really is a highly priced ticket. So this is important that we see these fan satisfaction scores going up. And a 12% growth in ticket sales. They also had a 5% growth in food and beverage and an 8% growth in merchandise sales as well. So lots of really key measures here. I'm going to just move to a video just to sort of finalize our story, and then I'm going to be video. So I'm just actually going to stop sharing for a moment because I want to see shining faces. and just see if this is making sense to you. You're getting something out of this. You can give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. How are we doing? Thumbs up, I'm seeing. Okay, great, good, because you know when you're staring at a slide, I just want to make sure. So we're going to go back to a slide, and I'm going to invite Dominic to come in here, and we're going to talk about Dominic, as you heard, is a 4-time Prism Award winning coach. So he's going to talk about some of his engagements. He won this year for Lindt, working with Lindt Chocolate. Talk about a great engagement. I do tease him that he never ever brought me any Lindt chocolate, and I work with him a lot, so he owes me big time. Just saying, you are all my witnesses. Okay, so Dominic, I'll go back to sharing my screen just to pull up your side for a moment here, and then we'll carry on. Okay.
Thanks, Janet, and welcome everybody. So I've had the pleasure of working, what you just heard was really quite a gold standard, and you were walked through a real textbook example of how to structure coaching engagements. And what's behind all of that, and you know, Janet and I are privileged to have been we were certified as executive coaches through Royal Roads University, which created our contact with Essential Impact. And Essential Impact is an organization that has had so many of these global Prism Awards and have worked with large organizations. So what you saw was a real gold standard and years of experience in creating coaching culture. I want to take that now, and you know, Janet talked about that, but what I want to do is kind of broaden it and speak a little bit to the rest of us. And what I mean by that is how else, you know, versus when you're looking at this gold standard textbook way of doing it, how else can you structure these engagements? And so I'm going to speak to some of the more messy engagements and ones that have even I haven't even taken them forward to, you know, for Prism or anything like that. But there has been an impact, and I think that that's good to learn from. So there's a few bullets that I'm going to touch on, and we probably will get the slide off in a minute. But so this is about how do you engage and get in the game with any client. And so a few things that I'll touch on is showing up as a coach. So I'm going to talk about that, staying on the client's agenda, allowing the client to lead. And then something I say is look where you're going. I'll say more about that. And then most of all, in some of these engagements is about being flexible. All of the fun is going to be in the ups and downs, the twists and turns, because not everything works, you know, according to a certain strategy. So thanks, Janet. So the first part in terms of showing up as a coach rather than a consultant, when I look at the engagements, all of them, including, you know, the most recent one, which was Lindt, they started from some other need, and then really what I'd say is your vision as a coach can take them somewhere potentially, and you'll engage with the client the way you would with any individual client. So even if I look at where Lindt came from, and this will speak to, there's so many different ways you go in. When, you know, when Janet was talking, she talked about, you know, you start having executive sponsorship and you're aligned with the organization and all of that. But there have been many engagements that I have done that they did not start like that at all. And, you know, one of my colleagues is, I can see he's on this webinar as well, Todd Sinclair. And he and I, from the early days, where Todd would bring me in because Todd was very effective in working with sales organizations. So he'd be doing sales training and that kind of stuff. And then he'd bring me in. Eventually now Todd is a credentialed coach and working on all of that. So I think I rubbed off on him the passion of coaching. But in the beginning, it was about going in and really seeing what was going on in other areas. So there were engagements that I did where it started not with executive sponsorship. There were some where HR was not even involved. So in other words, it really worked as only an initiative to help in a few of them where it was a sales organization and they were just trying to improve sales. And then it's interesting what the twists and turns are and what can happen and how the vision of all of that can get bigger and bigger. But the key to it is what I said in the first bullet is you show up as a coach rather than a consultant. And I think that's going to be good news to everybody who's here, because there's probably a very good reason why you are coaches and you were attracted to being a coach rather than going down a more of a consulting route. What I found is, especially in the beginning, is for some reason, once we start working with organizations, we get trapped in thinking that we have to be smart and we have to be expert. And a little bit, it's like we're trying to be, we're trying to lead them, where we're trying to show them that we know more. And as far as, for me, that didn't work very well. And so that's why I'm saying this: show up as a coach rather than a consultant. So if I was going through the ICF core competencies, and it's amazing if you stay on them and you stay focused on the core competencies, even in the work with an organization, it is incredible how effective it is from a sales perspective. And Todd and I had these conversations before, and I know Essential Impact actually even has a program which is about a coach approach to sales or something, which it really grounds you in that when you're being a coach. And think about these competencies that you would take into any engagement: creating trust and intimacy with the client. So this is really about being concerned for them, understanding what they want, the active listening, the powerful questioning. These are all skills which you have a lot of training in. And things like the direct communication, these elements, you have a lot of skill in already. And so if you're bringing it in when you're working with an organization, it can help you to be in there and listening as to what is it that they're wanting to do. When you're listening for what they're wanting to do, it's very different than trying to sell them on what it is that you can do, or what it is that sometimes we try to sell them on how great coaching is and what kind of an impact coaching will have. Mostly they don't care. So what they really care about is whatever their problem is. Isn't it amazing? They're just like our clients. They just don't care about coaching. What they really care about is what they want, right? So you want to be in there listening for what they want. And so in some of these engagements where what they've wanted, I've had some where what they've wanted was simply to get compliance to certain processes, right? Or what they've wanted is a certain level of performance, or sometimes it's people-ish, right? Like where they say, well, we want higher engagement or whatever. But oftentimes it's a real performance business challenge that they want. So then you as a coach, it becomes, are you clear of how coaching fits with that? And in your own mind, are you clear about what's the impact as a greater coaching culture is brought into that organization, or more of a coach approach is brought into that organization? Because if you're confident and clear about that, then that gets communicated. Staying on, so that kind of relates to the other bullet there, which was about staying on the client's agenda. And so they're the ones who are going to determine what what this will be about and what the value is going to be about. And so you can structure what you're offering according to that. Allowing the client to lead. This was another piece that I found with Lint, for example. The way that whole engagement worked is that the sort of the approach that I used is a bulk of it is within the Lint program. Like, in other words, I can find elements that I've done before, but you will, when you look, there is a chunk of that program within Lint, which was completely added in. There's like a 360 assessment in there, which I wouldn't do in the other ones that I've done, for example. And all of this fit in exactly to their needs and based on what they were trying to accomplish. So the whole thing got very customized, and the in this case, the HR leader, when you look at the program itself, Erin Gordon, who I worked with on this, so and she's the head of HR there. So the way I say it is her fingerprints are all over this program. So many elements and pieces of this program that you can see that is what she put in. That is what she wanted. So allowing the client to lead. The last couple of bullets, the one I say is look where you're going. This is something that for me, and you would know in coaching when you're working with clients, what I say is that they will move in the direction that they're looking. So clients will always move in the direction that they're looking. So where are they looking? And so you want to have that conversation about what's the destination, what's the vision for all of this? At the end, what difference will any of this make? And so you're painting this picture with them. You're really clarifying this with them. And then you get to be a coach in keeping them pointed and reminded of where they say they want to go. What makes these engagements, I'd say the ones that have been very effective, have been that just like you would do in a coaching conversation with individuals, you are using the energy of the client to move this entire thing forward. And what I mean by that is you have them pointed to a dream or a vision that they want, so that instantly has a lot of energy for them. And then you get to be a coach and you're using their energy, their inspiration for wanting to move toward that dream. So look where you're going and keep them looking where this is all going. In the end, by the way, that piece will also help you with metrics, because the way they'll know they got there is things have changed. And so this is the beginning of the metrics piece, so that you start to think about how will we know and what difference will there be, and you can begin right up front to start to construct those kinds of what's going to be the impact of this. And then in the end, have fun with it. Be flexible. There's all these twists and turns and ups and downs, and you have to laugh at some of them. I remember one of it could have been the second one of these that I ever tried. In the organization we had worked with, the way we got in was through one group. And we kind of infiltrated that group. We started to put the coaching approach within it and all of that. And HR wasn't even involved because they weren't really interested. They had other priorities. And then what happened was that there was some meeting that went on. I wasn't even involved in any of that. I heard about it later. And in this meeting, the set of senior managers who were in the business unit that had been trained in coaching and all of that, they were in this meeting, and HR was in that meeting, and they were having some discussion of something. And HR referred to coaching and said how, you know, you're going to need to coach or do something. I forget what they said about some situation, you know, that had to happen. And the managers, the senior leaders who were there, said to HR, well, that's not coaching. Imagine that. So you get the senior leaders in the business, or business leaders, telling HR, you don't know what coaching is. And that got their interest. That kind of perked them up to, what do you mean we don't know what coaching is? And then, of course, that got a whole conversation going about, well, you know, we've been doing coaching and we've been training in coaching, and suddenly HR was interested in what is coaching. And I remember in that organization, then a whole rollout came where, how does HR use more of a coach approach, and so that they can use a coach approach and then bring it to their work with managers and all that. So a lot of fun things can happen, even though it's not working in a textbook style, as long as, you know, you kind of keep your eye on the road and what's ahead of you. So we'll leave it at that for now. I'll turn it back to Janet.
Yeah, and just one of the things we wanted to do, in the spirit of, you know, we've shared with you some principles and models and sort of approaches under which we approach our coaching engagement. And I love that you're all getting the sense here, it's a coach approach to getting the contract. Dominic, what would you say is a lesson learned that you might want to share with the group? What's a lesson learned?
Well, it is start with whatever you can start with. In other words, you don't have to. I have never gone into any of these with this idea like, I'm going to get this big engagement and put, you know, this big program in. It's really whatever that opening is, just starting there. And when you're just wanting to give it your all and make a difference and contribute, it grows and grows and grows and grows. Because if you're delivering value, more of that, of course, is going to be welcome.
Yeah. And I think one of my takeaways in doing these engagements is really, I have always an essential impact as well. We try to start at the top. So getting the senior leaders involved first. And I've shared it to you that way in the model, but I want to say to you, that doesn't always happen. It does not always happen. And sometimes the client, you know, can't get the senior leaders involved, and we've started in the middle with directors or managers, and lo and behold, lots of traction from that, and then it starts to filter up to the executives. So, you know, we're sharing with you the gold standard, but in reality, it doesn't always happen that you manage to train all the vice presidents first. Sometimes because of time, it doesn't work. So I just wanted to share that. We're going to have more. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that one too, a really great example, and you and I were also involved in that one, was the Rogers, which won a Prism Global Award. That
Yes.
was also an essential impact one. But it's interesting with that one because it intentionally did not start from a top. It was literally a decision, and I remember like a strategic decision that decided to say that where the greatest impact is going to be, that affects most of the employees, is to start one level lower, which was the director level. So it was literally decided to do it that way. So it worked so well. And then, of course, what we saw was, as the rollout happened and these directors came, then all of a sudden the VPs were like, wait a minute, what about us? What's going on with my directors? What about us?
Yes, and also the directors were holding their VP's account to say, I'm getting coached a certain way. How come you're not coaching me that way? Because this is what I'm learning. So then they knew they had to learn the coaching model. So great examples. We're going to have more time for questions at the end. So I just want to turn it over to Kenshin, and she's going to talk a little bit about, so I'm just going to share my share my screen for a minute to show you. So Dominic was kind of talking about the snakes and ladders game. You know, there's some ups and downs. So how do you raise your game is really what we want to get to. There's a very simple way for you to raise your own game, and Kanchan Prinsloo is going to talk about that.
Thank you, Janet and Dominic. As you can all appreciate, I've been as excited as you have following the path that both of them have done. Now, the hat that I wore this year was lead judge for PRISM. Alicia's already touched on what PRISM is. It is absolutely the pride of ICF Toronto in 2000 when it was originated and adopted by ICF Global, the PRISM Awards. And in 2005, actually, I believe. What's powerful about PRISM is it is organizationally centered, but what's powerful, it really does showcase the excellence of coaching and how it can be embedded within organizations, how it actually spreads. Which is, as you can tell by both of the examples today, it was a lot of fun this year going through our PRISM applications and really seeing what excellence looks like. So the piece that I would say in terms of PRISM, if some of you are not aware, for ICF Toronto, we do have 5 categories. There is the large private sector, which is 500 and plus 500 and plus employees. There's mid-sized, small, not-for-profit, and public. Not all of the awards are given. Not everyone is given because, again, we're going to excellence. Now, how do you get to that is adopting a PRISM mindset. And there's 4 key areas that we look at as independent judging panel. And first and foremost is the aligning with the ICF standards, aligning with the organization strategy is second, sustainment and impact. And Janet, if you want, I'll just speak to them a little bit here. So we've got a little bit of engagement. With the ICF standards, one of the key things that we have, we are looking for the rigor that ICF brings, the rigor with our code of ethics, and as well, just our values, our core values. So really digging through and sort of seeing what all that is, what are we seeing with the ICF standards, how they are being met. The second key area is strategy and showing how goals and priorities are met through the coaching initiative. You've heard a lot already with Dominic and Janet speaking to strategy. Some of the things that the first part of their model was alignment to organization, mission, and vision. And the piece around that is what is the strategy? How are we aligning with the organization's business goals? And the third criteria is sustainability. How is coaching embedded and possibly expanded within the organization? And one of the things that I've heard and we were looking for is there's a lot of initiatives at play. And some of the piece that Janet was speaking of was regarding getting executive sponsorship. Making sure that sustainability happens because you've got the right players in place, marketing, social media. Sustainability may, to Dominic's point just now, which could start from bottom up, top, bottom, whatever it is, what is the best way to create sustainability? And the fourth criteria that we looked at as independent judges was impact. And we've spent a fair bit of time on this because it's absolutely critical. This is why a lot of you are here. What are we seeing as judges that is observable, measurable, and see what the results are? Some of the things that were spoken about today was the engagement scores before and after, following up with alumni. One of the things that we really found was impactful. It wasn't just sort of what is observable and measurable within our client, it's our client's client, which went back to with MLSC, which had to do with the fan satisfaction score. That's huge. That's talking about embedding and as well sort of seeing impact come forward. All of these are great when it comes down to an organizational space, and I have to say that's the hat that I'm wearing because of Prism. To Dominic's point, and I keep going left because he's in the Hollywood square that's left to me right now. To Dominic's point, it can also be applied to us as individual coaches. Yes, as we really take a look at our core standards, our core values, and our ethics piece, that's what we need to really turn to and look at for guidance. But when we're looking at strategy, how do our clients' goals, maybe not business goals, but how do our personal goals, how are those aligning? What are they prioritizing around that? So using strategy from a personal perspective. Sustainability, whether we're doing an employee engagement score or whether we're doing just a quick score of our client, where do you feel you're at with this goal that you've got from 0 to 10? Do a quick measurement that way and check in. Maybe it's the end of each coaching session or at the end of the engagement. And lastly, that's also sustainability is and impact actually melded in. Sustainability, how is coaching? What is the long-term impact of the coaching that we're doing? That's the key piece that I would say that I wanted to touch on. I will wrap it here because I am confident you will have some questions. Alicia, I will give that back to you and let you take it from here.
Just
And if
unmute,
not,
unmute Alicia, just unmute your mic.
We all can't read lips, right? Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Dominic and Janet and Kanchan. Wow. What I was trying to say there with lip service was just how there was just so much there, right? Like there was so much, so many points. I was trying to grab some of them as we were going along, and I threw some of them in the chat box just so I could remember. So hopefully you guys have been able to take a look at that. We have some thoughts and some comments like from Karina that talked about really, loving using a coach approach to business development, right? That we really heard that you don't only think about coaching when you're actually in the engagement and doing it. You start thinking about coaching even before you start the engagement, right? And Dominic and Janet really talked about how staying open and curious, and Leslie really called that out. The benefits, being open, curious, meeting the client where the client is at, starting wherever that might be, right? Ideally the top of the house, but it can work anywhere. Just start where you're at, where there's that opening. As we often say in coaching, meeting your client where they're at. So really heard that loud and clear. And really thank you for calling out Rogers and that winning the ICF Global Award. I saw we have a number of people online that are from Rogers and are giving a big shout out and saying, yeah, it worked. It was great. Shireen and Mia and some others just saying, yes, we saw the impact of coaching. We know it works. And we're very proud to say that we work with Rogers. So that's really great to hear. Is there anything else that people would love to ask questions about? That's kind of what I've captured out of the chat so far. Shout outs to say amazing results, MLSE. As I said, they know coaching works. They put 70% of their budget against coaching, which is phenomenal. And I love to say, and they have the ring to prove it, right? I mean, among all the other measurements that Janet and Dominic shared with us that really prove that coaching works. So that is fantastic. Anyone want to ask some questions, maybe raise their hand or visually raise their hand?
We've got 2 in the chat already, Alicia.
Okay, I guess I missed them. Please.
I think one from Michelle Chambers and Mia as well. So I think we could respond to that while other people have.
Sure. Okay. What suggestions do you have if the client or organization does not have a lot of metrics or KPIs in place? I'll start with that.
Did you want to expand on that, Michelle, or any? Yeah.
Nice to see you again, Dominic. Great, great work. Thank you for sharing all of your insights in this particular coaching engagement with the client. A lot of organizations obviously have metrics in place, but what about those ones that don't have a lot of KPIs, or ones that you might be able to see from a coaching approach to support? You know, and that's a realistic thing. And if you're trying to encourage them to measure it, but they don't have the money to invest in that collection of data to support it, what could you do beside like pre and post?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dominic, I noticed your mic's on mute, so I'm just going to quickly answer. There's lots of things. You can do monkey surveys.
And some of the other ones that you shared, please.
Oh, there okay, you're back. So you can do a monkey survey and just set some parameters before and after. So measuring decision making and asking the coaches, you know, the people involved in the program what they're learning. So that's one way of doing it. And also, if there is an engagement survey in place, that's a really good place to start, if there is one, and pulling out certain questions or adding to it if possible. Ultimately, coaching should improve. When people are in a coach approach culture, it should improve engagement.
Yeah, so those are cases where the other part is if you find, and if they can logically link some other metric to the coaching. The MLSE one, which had fan satisfaction scores, and then and now they have to link that as well for themselves, right? So that's a metric they're already doing. You're not asking them to do another metric. And then I remember, I think with that too, we asked them to consider the percentage of the change that was relevant to the coaching. And in other words, so that they could consider, well, you know, we've offered new products or we've done some other things that might have influenced it as well. However, you know, how much would have been relevant to the coaching? The pre and post stuff is actually pretty effective, especially if you keep it isolated. I've gone to, particularly when you look at what's your impact, this idea of the effectiveness of managers. The common thing in most organizations is that they've underinvested in their people, leaders, and their managers. I say that as a former HR professional, and I know I was in one organization where what we would do is take a person and promote them, shake their hand, and wish them luck. And that's sort of was it, right? And what's really bad is that these are the people managing the largest expense line in most P&L statements, which is the salary and wages and benefits. So you would never do that on something like a marketing budget. I mean, everyone would come and say, well, what are you spending this money on? And are we getting a return on the money we're spending on advertising? But here you have these salary lines, right, that are, how's that going? And who is managing these millions and millions of dollars in salaries? And who it is the managers? And how trained are they? How good are they at managing? So I've always used in the pre and post survey, I will ask managers who go through the program, I'll ask them a question around, as a leader, I feel, you know, do I feel more effective now as a people manager? And then I'll ask specific questions. Do I feel more effective in supporting employees to improve their own performance and results? And in supporting employees to to solve their own problems and challenges at work. So I will use these questions, and so use them where it's pre and post, and people can self-assess. There's other things that could be interesting, like I've often used that I am now giving more recognition and acknowledgement now than I was before the program started. So we can sort of see if there's any change or impact around that. Employees who are using more feel like they are using more of their strengths and talents at work. So there's different ways that you can think about how is this program going to impact it, and then coming up with ways to prove it.
Great. Well, thank you, Dominic, for that. And we've got a few good ideas there, from SurveyMonkey to self-assessments pre and post. So hopefully that gave people a few different ideas. We had a question from Michelle. No, we just did that. Mia, did you want to ask your question live, Mia?
Sorry, I didn't know how to unmute. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Mia.
I was just curious if you had any surprises to the results of MLSC in the program, either positive or negative, and if there was anything that you would have changed in your approach as trainers, as coaches, towards the staff that you coached.
Yeah, I'll take the first part of that. One surprise that, and it really came out when we were preparing the application for PRISM, because the one thing about preparing an application for a PRISM award is you're very rigorous about going through your engagement. And one of the things I was actually phenomenally surprised to find out was how much innovation has happened because of a coach approach. And so whenever there's a market disruptor now, what MLSC does, first and foremost, before they used to throw money at things, but now what they do is they bring their leaders together and they say, let's coach each other on this disruptor. Let's figure this out. So I'll give you a beautiful example of this. When COVID hit, they have a huge food and beverage capacity. They had food in their freezers, they had food in their fridges, they had food in their cupboards. So, and their arenas were empty. And so through a coach approach about what can we do, they're now feeding 22,000 people every day by turning the hockey rink into a massive food kitchen, as well as BMO Field. And I just think that, and that's a kind of big story right now, but they've also done some other really amazing things through innovation. So I would, as a coach now, be a lot more mindful about trying to tie that to faster innovation and creativity. Like definitely I'm more mindful of that now. Dominic, you want to add anything about, that was a surprise for me.
Yeah, I think, and this was what I loved about MLSE, was the variety of, in one organization, the variety of places where the coaching was happening was really quite surprising, because it's unique in a way.
Yeah.
So they have the restaurants, and then they've got that, you know, the whole stadium thing and all of that. So I guess the bit of surprise was this, oh yeah, how's that gonna work? When, you know, on the night of a hockey game, when you're trying to do in the moment coaching with an usher, like, I mean, it's like, oh, I don't know, I would never have thought of that, right? So those were a bit of the surprises, and same with some of the other pieces, and all in one organization. So, and then you were training all of that in a single room, right, with a mix of people. Yeah, anyway, that was just, I think it actually added to it more than anything, but.
Good. So Alicia, I'm not sure how much more time we have, but we can hang on for more questions if there's some.
Yeah, well, we had this scheduled till 4:30, so I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, how people, if they have to go, then thank you very much for joining us. And if you can hang on for a few more minutes, sounds like we've got a few more questions, so more learning to do. The other one, I guess I would just pick up on what Mia said, was the other part of that was, what might you have done differently? That's a curious question for me too.
You know, the thing about any of these engagements is there's a lot of ebbs and flows, and scheduling is always like one of the things that's always a challenge is you've got a class booked for September, and then especially at MLSC, well, who knew the Raptors were going to go into finals, and then everything got put on pause, and then we were supposed to do the stuff in June, and the Toronto FC soccer team went into finals, and everything got put on pause. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, doing differently is sometimes you have to let go of kind of the process and how you think things should flow, because what's the most important thing is that the company can serve its clients. And so I think for me that was, so as a coach and in your coaching engagements, that's going to shift how your revenue is coming in, right? When things keep getting put on pause. So just be mindful of that, yeah, things are not always going to flow the way you hope that they do. And certainly with MLSC, we actually have a class that we were supposed to teach, well, almost like 8 months ago, and then COVID hit. So yeah, always on pause. That's something. Doing differently though, I would definitely be aligning more to this innovation piece. That's a takeaway for me in terms of doing differently. Yeah, in the classroom, outside the classroom, as I work with the sponsor. Yeah.
Great. Dominic, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think philosophically with that, it's that to know that it's all working out perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, oh, big surprise, this thing took a turn to the left. Isn't that perfect? Like, I wonder what's perfect about this, because it's not clear to me right now. so it really is about thinking that part of it through. So I don't know, when I look back, I don't so much on any of the ones that I've done, sort of see a regret or a mistake, although I've seen myself add things or change things moving forward, right? So based on the learning, but yeah, I don't know if there's so much a mistake about it, but you will learn as you do it, and you just have to trust that it's kind of your own gut and intuition with the organization. It's going to be fine, and then as it changes and turns, just move
Go with
it.
the flow. And
Go with the flow.
we learned that through our sustainment sessions. Every quarter we'd go into MLSC, Dominic and I would have a plan and exactly what we were going to do in our 2-hour sustainment session with the leaders. And then we always started this way. Okay, what do you want to learn, right? We wanted to set the coaching contract in the moment, take a coach approach to our facilitation. And they would say, well, we're really having trouble working with unionized staff, or we're really struggling with challenging conversations. So everything we planned would go out the window, and we would tailor to what was happening in the room. So I think this piece around flexibility when it comes to serving your client is really important.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have Liz Costas has asked a question. Liz, did you want to ask that live if you're still on the line?
Sure. My question is around time horizon. When I'm coaching new managers at my work, and I was wondering, what is a good time frame in terms of assessing the pre and post performance?
Dominic, you want to take that?
So let me see here. I've literally done it. Well, you're talking about coaching them over time, right?
Yes.
Versus say a workshop of
Yes.
something, right? So I pointed out the workshop bit, or why I point that one out is that I've literally done it with measurements literally within a workshop, so that I'll ask them to sort of assess, their coming in perspective versus their going out perspective, so that I get that. But then there's coaching, like especially when I'm doing a program for the sustainment, then there's over a few months, at which point I'll reassess later. So I'm getting a bit of a pre-self-assessment and post-assessment. And it's amazing what you can see with that. Like, I've had a pretty consistent increase in their sense of effectiveness as a coach and effectiveness as a manager. So you will get, here's what I thought I was at when I started, and here's where I see myself at the end of all that. And then you can ask for evidence, right? Like, so for example, they may self-assess higher, so what are the differences that you now see yourself doing? And and I get responses in there like less, I'm avoiding advice and not telling people what to do, I am listening more to my employees and my team. I am allowing them to figure out their answers. So they'll point to behaviors and they'll literally tell you their behaviors as well. That's very powerful for you in sort of proving or showing that the work of the coaching has had an impact with
Yeah.
them.
And just to add to that, you know, we have emphasized some very quantitative measurements because businesses speak in that language, but we also feel that it's really important to get those qualitative measures too. So testimonial statements from leaders, you know, like what Dominic was saying, if a leader is saying, I am making decisions faster, I am more confident in making my decisions, those are very powerful because ultimately coaching is in service of leadership development. So qualitative measures are, you know, a mix of both is important to demonstrate success.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
I just want to point out, I don't know if, I think it was Doug, I'm not sure if he's still on, but there was a mention about that video that I showed for MLSC. So when I was talking about marketing plan, they create their own videos. That video is created by staff at MLSC, even our executive sponsor.
Oh, sorry, Janet, you're muted.
That video that we produced at MLSC was done internally. So that's part of marketing. You know, you can create your own. Now they're pretty darn good at making videos, but you know, that's just an example of if you can do something like that, that helps to promote the engagement as well and the success factors that you're doing, like a 60-second video.
Yeah, I have had Lint, for example, has part of their sustainment is that they are sending to all the people managers, all the leaders and people managers within Lint. They get it's called a coaching moment. It comes out, I think it's monthly, and marketing gets involved in that, doing the coaching moment. And it is structured where they are using it to reinforce principles and ideas around coaching for the managers. And they'll have in there very actionable, simple tip so that what we've heard from the managers as I've been talking to them through the coaching is that, oh, that's so great because it keeps reminding me. It keeps reminding me of, you know, what I could be doing or should be doing more of with my employees. And sometimes, like oftentimes where we will send it out, like for example, could be a tip around creating accountability or delegating, but we'll often build in and give them, you know, 5 or 10 coaching questions. And so that, you know, that they could use that in a conversation. So when they get this coaching moment, it reminds them of it, and then they get 5 or 10 coaching questions within it. Like that's actionable, they can use right away. And so that we've had really good feedback about that as a sustainability piece.
Dominic, I'm just wondering, as you mentioned Lint, could you just share with us a little bit about what was the outcome or the results from your engagement with Lint? What was it they were wanting, and what was the outcome through your work, your coaching work?
Well, they had an employee engagement piece for sure, because employees felt they weren't as involved in their work. They weren't empowered enough. They weren't, and that's an issue. What it came down to is an issue of delegation and an issue of giving people something, whatever they're responsible for, and then coaching them, right, rather than micromanaging, right, like that. So that part was there. There, related to it was people feeling like they're developing and growing at work, and it had ties to the first thing because when you're not being given work that you can get your teeth into and you can actually make mistakes in and do it, then it just feels like you're basically waiting around to be told what to do and be given the next set of instructions. So those areas were big, and then those areas, when it came to within the survey, were ones that there were big changes in. And Lint has the Great Places to Work survey. Like, they have the other surveys that they were using, so they didn't need to do a specific one around coaching to see differences there. But the pieces we were asking, which was changes to manager behaviors, so that's where some of this piece about I avoid advice and telling people what to do. I'm listening more, active listening, and hold people capable and accountable. And there were a few other behavior pieces, but those ones came out very high as what was different in the manager engagement with employees.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So I really heard it was about helping managers become coaches, more so than delegators or micromanagers, it sounds like. Is that capturing
right
it? Yeah.
Right, yes. And once you're on the path of coaching and you're on the coaching mindset and coach approach, that is an automatic. Like, that's what's going to happen. So you're going to back off the telling people what to do and how to do it and what's next and all of that. That whole path will lead to greater empowerment, better delegation, all of that.
Yeah. And we, as we're talking about, probably unlock a lot more innovation too, right? When people feel that they can bring their ideas forward and be more participative in discussions and have more open-mindedness, right? I imagine that they probably was a benefit in their innovation as well.
Huge examples of that kind of thing, like those are some of those qualitatives. In some of these programs, all of these programs have a sustainment component where I'm regularly meeting, usually it's monthly, with the leaders who initially been trained. And so I get to hear sort of about the application and also what's the success and highlights and learning that they're seeing. And so, and they get these pieces of homework in between the sessions that are real simple, like they're simple tip. Like, for example, I give them, it's called the advice giving exercise. Between now and next month when we meet again, be aware of your wanting to give advice or the advice that you're getting. And if you can catch yourself before you give advice, stop and ask 3 questions first. Like, it's a simple thing, right? So if you notice, stop, ask 3 questions. So then on one of these, a manager gets on and says, well, I had, I think it was a sales leader, and he says, my account executive walked in and she said, I have this problem, and she starts talking about what she's going to do. And I knew exactly what she needed to do. So I was, right. And he goes, and then just before it came out of my mouth, I remembered the homework. He said, I remembered the homework. And so I caught myself before I could say anything. And then I thought, I have to ask 3 questions first, right? So he says, so I started and I said, oh, well, what do you think the issue is? And what have you thought of so far? And I don't know, so he gets to 3 questions. He said, what I thought the issue was not the issue at all. And so he was surprised at where this actually went. And then in the end, how basically she had an approach that she came up with, which he said was, I wasn't even thinking about it. So then they come on these, touch points, and then they're sharing with each other, which is creating huge amounts of reinforcement, because of course all the other managers are now listening to that and kind of going, yeah, I should be doing that more.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, awesome. Leanne, I see you're still on the line. Would you like to ask your question live and in person, Leanne?
Sure, thank you. I really appreciated the model at the beginning, so I'm kind of going back to the beginning, and I know we're close to the end of the call, and the importance of having an executive sponsor and being clear on what their purpose and mission is. And my question was, what happens if, or have you encountered where you think that the coachee, the person you're working with, gets it and they don't, or worse, they don't really buy into it. Either it's not clear to the individual what their sponsor expects the results should be, or they're not buying into it. Now, I don't expect that would have happened with MLSE, but in some of the messier engagements I've had, that has happened. And how do you handle it or prevent that from happening?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting you asked that, Leanne, because even in MLSE right now, because we've been 3 years on this project, there's a shift happening with our senior executive sponsor around wanting to move towards, because of succession planning, like identifying high potentials and, you know, really getting uber rigorous around that. And so had some, you know, as the external coach working with the sponsorship team, having conversations. So that's going to shift, by the way, the dollars, right? The leadership development dollars, because if there's something deliberate happening for about 25, the idea was about 25 high potential leaders, the 70% dedicated to coaching is not going to be available anymore, like at that high level. So part of working as the external coach with the sponsorship team is influencing and coaching around, and coaching through influencing around how, well, if you want to work with high potentials, coaching is still a big part of that. Like the coach approach is still going to be the big part of that. So sometimes it's a question of education and influence and coach approach to business development piece. It's it happens, you know, like it probably is going to happen at MLSE. We're not going to have that same budget dollars going forward. And so it's always about being in communication, I think, and tying back to the first graphic, which is about aligning to business strategy and to what those objectives are within both the strategic plan, but the annual operating plan as well. It's a bit of a roundabout way, but it definitely happens. And, you know, I think part of our job as coaches is to show how, if when coaching is embedded, it really is a leadership approach, as opposed to a flavor of the month type of activity. Yeah. Dominic, do you want to add anything to?
I've found too with that, where there's misalignment, I've used as the opportunity to help that leader to, well, to realize that part of their responsibility is for their own alignment. So I will remind them of what the organizational priority is or what this focus is, and then I'll say, and I'm hearing you say this, which is quite, how does that fit, right? How's that fitting? And when it's not fitting, so what do you need to do about that, right? Like, so, and in some of those, they've had to go back and have conversations with their leadership and sort of challenge upward, to take responsibility for getting themselves in alignment, or make other choices, right?
Thank you. So you call it out, it sounds like,
Yep.
when you see it.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been surprised. I've found myself being a tough coach in some of those scenarios, which has sometimes surprised me because I'm like,
to pass it over now to Janet and Dominic and Kanchan to take us through the presentation.